Our story begins 20 years after that individual left Earth and found himself in another world. That day had come, the day he would defeat the monster and save the world. The monster, however, wanted to know whether he would truly endure, referring to that individual as the true being worthy of being called a hero. Unlike his companions who are hanging by a thread, that individual was accompanied by a saint, a mage, and a knight. The hero's name was Hyunok. He made it clear to the monster that it did not seem to be in very good shape. Thinking Hyunok insolent, the monster immediately attacked him. Hyunok showed no weakness and clashed head-on with the creature. The monster declared that if Hyuns did not submit, it would tear him to pieces and leave the land completely scarred by its teeth and claws, launching its attacks toward the hero. Hyuns blocked the attacks and felt that it was already time to put an end to everything. Quickly, he unleashed a skill called Paradox of Flames, causing massive destruction throughout the area. He then advanced toward the monster as the battle grew increasingly intense. Music. At one point, Hyunok was struck by the monster and his guard was not enough to hold it back. The monster proclaimed that Hyunok's attack was far too weak and had not even left a scratch. After realizing this, the hero prepared himself and swiftly launched another attack at the monster to see whether this time it would be enough to crush its arrogance. Flames engulfed the monster for a moment. Soon, its crown fell, and the monster became eerily silent. It had never imagined that a human in that world could stand against it. Hyunsuk was about to tell the monster once again that he did not belong to that world, but the monster assumed the hero would continue spouting nonsense. In any case, it no longer cared, since its body would be absorbed by the earth sooner or later. Just when it believed it would be erased, the hero knew that the monster was struggling to regenerate. The black flame burning it was Hyunok's special ability, which he called the Paradox Flame. Unlike ordinary flames that burn using oxygen, the Paradox Flame uses abstract concepts as fuel. Reviving itself over the centuries had been the monster's hobby. But that ended at that moment, for it, music, was now burning, its very existence reduced to fuel. The monster wondered whether its time was finally coming to an end. Even so, it believed that Hyunok would never be remembered as the hero who saved the world because the people he considered his companions were actually just waiting for him to die there. Hyuns clarified that he already knew this, which surprised the monster, while the saint begged Hyunok not to believe the monster's words. However, after hearing her, Hunyo thought that perhaps he should start with the saint herself. She was the woman who claimed to love him and seduced him every day. Yet in truth, she despised him for being an outsider. All her attempts at seduction had been part of the plan. She was shocked to hear this from the hero. Hyunok knew that when the time came to purge the hero after the subjugation was complete, he would hesitate to strike her, and he wanted to know from the music, saint, whether he was wrong. He then declared that the other two were no different. The knight had received a national treasure from the emperor in order to eliminate him after the monster was slain. The cowardly emperor had acted with extreme caution, fearing that the hero might seize his throne. The knight could not understand how the hero knew all of this. As for the mage, he was someone who loved human experimentation, music, and he seemed to hate Hyunok simply because Hyunok opposed the system of slavery. In short, the fact that they intended to kill the hero after the monster's death was something Hyuns had known for the past 5 years. The monster could not understand the hero. With all the power he had used to corner it, Hyuns could have easily destroyed the world that had turned its blades against him. Hyunok explained that he had not done so because he wanted to return home. The monster could not grasp his reasoning, and the scene then shifted to Earth 20 years earlier. Hyuns had been an ordinary 30-year-old office worker until he was guided by a being called a goddess and transported to another world. There, he was chosen as the hero destined to save that world from monsters. In the end, Hyunsuk knew there were many stories like music, stories of ordinary people achieving greatness in another world. However, the world he arrived in was a disaster in itself. He tried every conceivable method to return to Earth, but the main objective, defeating the monsters and saving the world, always pursued him. There was only one path, and so for 20 years, he trained to fight monsters, proving that nothing can defeat a patient man. He vividly remembered the time he asked to enter a village and was blocked by several men, even after explaining that he had rescued a child of music from that village. Those men were unwilling to let him in, revealing that the child would die anyway. In that alternate world, everything was reversed. The world chose to abandon the wounded instead of saving them. It was unbelievably cruel to Hyuns. But the most serious problem was the medieval level of medicine and hygiene, where healing infections often meant tearing pieces of flesh away, or music, using similarly brutal methods, so the boy was going to lose his leg just to prevent a simple infection from taking over. All the healers had been mobilized for the battle, and there was no one left to treat the wounded. Hyunok thought things couldn't possibly get any worse. Then he was found by several priests while carrying the child in his arms. They knew the child had been captured by monsters and wanted to understand how the music hero had managed to recover the child. That was when something horrifying happened. It seemed the child had survived because a demon had possessed them. The priest decided they needed to exorcise the demon, taking advantage of the fact that they were already exorcising several other people. They believed the hero would not oppose the will of God. Hyuns realized that those repulsive beings from another world had no concept of human rights, and after enduring that world for 20 years, he had finally completed the mission given to him. Soon after, he demanded that the so-called goddess, who had practically seduced him in the desert when he was a fool, fulfill her promise. Suddenly a hole opened in the sky and a blonde woman emerged. "This is where you understand why Hyunok had been such a S. Understandable. Have a nice day." She declared that he had worked hard and that through his relentless efforts he had defeated the monster. Hyunok immediately grew anxious and asked whether she remembered him since he had subdued all the monsters. That meant all the experiences and memories he had gained there. Even his soul would be perfectly preserved and she would send him back to Earth. The goddess smiled as she listened, knowing full well that he truly hated that world. Still, she asked whether he felt the same way even after gaining enough power to become a threat to her, warning him that if he returned to Earth, all of his achievements as a hero would be nullified. Hyunok didn't like that at all and felt she was merely relieved that he was leaving just as promised. The goddess then revealed that the world no longer needed a monster and asked whether the hero would regret his decision. But there was only one thing Hyun wanted: to return to the world he knew and nothing else. The goddess confirmed it, and that cursed world was finally left behind. Suddenly a powerful light rushed toward Hyunsuk, and the goddess explained that his physical body on Earth had already perished, so she would place his soul into a new vessel. Hyunok grew worried and asked where he was going. The goddess said she could not explain in detail, but that it was a body destined for a miserable end. Though she was confident he would survive, in the end, Hyunok wanted to return to Earth so badly that he didn't care about coming back in a body with a terrible fate. He didn't care what destiny awaited him because he was certain it would be far better than the life he had endured in that other world. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and asked himself whether he had truly returned. He was on Earth in the year 2025. The hero Lee Hyunok now inhabited the body of an ordinary civilian named Lee Hyunok. He thought about those damn traitors from the other world and found it wonderful that he would never have to see their faces again. Then he noticed a mirror and saw his appearance from that moment onward. The hero couldn't believe he had really returned to Earth. The scene shifted to him staring at clean water flowing from a faucet. He felt immense joy seeing that it wasn't contaminated, something that felt more real to him than magic itself. He even thought that all mages could go to hell. Then he turned on the stove and couldn't believe he could produce fire just by pressing a button without needing to chop wood or build a campfire. And there was something else he had been missing. He had a box of fried chicken and began drooling the moment he picked up a piece. Proof of how much he had suffered in the other world. After taking a bite, he started trembling. It had been so long since he had tasted the true flavor of real food. He cried, having missed all of this deeply. At last, he could live a normal life again. First, he needed to readjust to Earth since it was now 2025. He noticed that the time flow of the other world had aligned with this one, but none of that mattered to him. He didn't care if adapting would be difficult or harsh. Nothing could be worse than that other world. The scene then changed to Chonyo taking a hot shower. He found it incredible that he didn't have to wait for the water to heat up. He was equally amazed by the cold air that came out at the push of a button. Even under a clear, bright sky, he was stunned by how completely different everything was compared to the filthy other world he had lived in. Shan-sok wondered what he should do first in 2025. Maybe start with StarCraft, but then he was suddenly startled by a strange creature and wondered what on earth was standing right in front of him. Soon, an announcement rang out to all residents, warning that a corrosion rift had appeared inside the apartment complex. Music. Shinoki had no idea what that was, and then came the order for all residents to evacuate immediately to the underground shelter. Shanio grew more and more confused when all of a sudden, music. He saw several creatures nearby. They looked like monkeys and quickly began smashing the window glass. Shanio started running, but those creatures soon caught up to him on the stairwell. All Shonio wanted was to understand what the hell was happening on Earth. He managed to hide and the strange creatures passed right by him. That was when he came across a child. Cheonok warned the boy that the area was dangerous and that he should run to the shelter. The kid then asked if Cheonok Music had seen where the monsters went. Completely baffled, Cheonok listened as the boy explained that he was going to kill the monsters and wanted to know if Cheonok would do the same. Shanseo became even more confused when the boy added that people said the earth had been like this for 13 years already. Shanyo felt a deep sense, music of despair, upon hearing that. The boy stubbornly refused to go to the shelter and Cheonok felt he couldn't leave the kid alone. In the end, he stayed with the boy who explained that a corrosion rift was an exit from which monsters emerged. No one knew why they formed or when and where they would appear. Cheonok was furious. After enduring all that hell in another world just to return to Earth, he discovered that this place had also turned into an infernal pit. He felt an overwhelming rage toward music, that goddess. Then the boy suddenly realized something and wondered why Cheonok knew nothing about all of this. Chonyo gave a flimsy excuse, saying he had been living in America for a while. The kid was shocked and asked how Chonyo had managed that, mentioning that the President of the United States had been impeached for secretly trying to send his daughter to Korea. Chonyo became increasingly overwhelmed by the information being thrown at him. Trying to steer the conversation elsewhere, Chonyo asked about the hunter the boy admired. The kid said her name was Lee Seun, a hunter from a guild called Janabe. She ranked 10th on Earth, wielded a massive sword as her main weapon, and was currently in Chiwon dealing with a corrosion rift. Cheonok felt relieved that he had managed to change the subject naturally. But he found it strange that an ordinary human could fight monsters just like the world he had once been summoned music to. He wanted to understand how that was even possible. The boy added that he really liked Leun's sword, and that there was a must-watch video about it on social media. Suddenly, Cheonok covered the boy's mouth. The kid didn't understand why, but Cheonok had sensed something wrong. He had done it because there were many monsters nearby, exactly 6, including the one they were hiding from. He felt that this body possessed above-average strength, and he was used to fighting multiple enemies at once. So, he believed it wouldn't be too difficult. Still, he didn't know what to do about the kid. He couldn't leave him alone, and he didn't have a proper weapon. That was when he noticed something floating in the air and wondered if it was mana. In the end, he was almost certain it was the same thing he had seen in the other world. He gathered that mana and hurled it at one of the creatures which looked completely confused. The mana had accumulated over 20 years was gone. But if mana existed in the air, that meant he could still use the paradox flame since it was rooted in his soul. To him, the power of fire felt disappointing, but it would be more than enough here. The boy, witnessing what Shan Silk had just done, was amazed. He hadn't imagined that Chanseo possessed a unique ability, and that was how Chonseok learned what they called such things in this world. The boy then warned him that the official Hunter Academy YouTube channel music said confirming a kill was important. Shiok saw the kid approaching the creature, which was a problem. While the paradox flame was still active, it wasn't advisable to get close until the target was fully dead. The creature lunged toward the boy, but Shansok shielded him and admitted that he had no idea what YouTube was. Music, though he thought it would be better if the kid stopped watching it. Shani asked if he could borrow the staff the boy was holding. The kid handed it over, and using the combat skills he had gained as a hero in the other world, Cheonok cut down several of the creatures. The boy was visibly shocked and asked whether Chonyo was secretly a hunter. Cheonok wasn't happy at all. He never imagined he would smell blood again after returning to Earth. He had endured all that hell, hoping to finally rest in peace. But if Earth was like this now, then it was no different from that other world. The scene shifted to a group of people gathered together with Cheonok arriving alongside the boy. A woman called out to the child whose name was Yoon Sang. She asked whether Cheonok had brought Yeonong there and thanked him profusely, saying her son was very reckless. At that moment, Chon Seok noticed that Yunang's mother wore luxury earrings and designer clothes. The kid was loaded, and that explained a lot to Chon Seok. Suddenly, a tremor occurred and a monster immediately smashed through the wall, baring its teeth. Everyone began to run in desperation music after seeing that the shelter wall had collapsed. Yunang shouted for Cheonok to escape right away. While Cheonok was suffering greatly at that moment because he felt he wasn't asking for much, he just wanted to return to the world he knew. He wanted to go back home, which he missed dearly, and he didn't believe he had asked for too much. Soon he called Yunong a brat, which greatly irritated Yuan Xiang. Chansuk wanted to know why Yunong wanted to become a hunter, even though he was rich. From Chansuk's point of view, Yuan Song could simply hide in a safe place, music, and live comfortably. There was no need to fight. Yong then explained that he had lost his father to a monster. A corrosion rift had opened in what he thought was a safe place, a subterranean bunker. That was when the boy realized there was no safe place on Earth. So even though he was not yet as strong as Shanoki, and monsters were still terrifying, he wanted to become the strongest hunter and eliminate all the corrosion rifts. Yunang was determined to save the world. He knew it might sound foolish to Chanok, but he still wanted to do it. In response, Chanok made it clear that Yunang would not become a great hunter, declaring that the kid would never be able to save the world. Yunyang's mother soon told her son that it was enough and that they should run immediately. Suddenly they heard a loud noise, and Chanok stated once again that Yuanong would not be the great hunter who saved the world because he would be the one to do it. He thought it was better to leave the job of saving the world to someone who had already done it before. In the end, the man had been summoned to another world, fought monsters for 20 years, and when he returned to Earth, he couldn't even enjoy his freedom as he was immediately confronted by a corrosion rift. He survived using the experience he had gained in his past life and promised a child that he would save the world. But the truth was that Chanok did absolutely nothing. He just played on his computer without a care. When he won the match, he found it very easy. He knew that someone who had saved the world once could do it again, but he wasn't really interested. He had said all of that very confidently in front of many people, but he truly didn't want to do it anymore. The desire to save the world had already faded. At that moment, he had games and abundant food, things he could only dream of in the other world, not to mention a system where he could do anything with just a touch. Besides, when it came to saving the world, there were already hunters for that. He looked at his smartphone to order some deliveries until he realized he had spent all of his compensation. The original owner of that body had been an employee of a logistics company and lost his job when the company went bankrupt due to a corrosion rift. Now Chuk's severance pay was gone. He had already been trying to find a new job, but he could see there was no chance of getting a normal one because of the constant appearance of corrosion rifts. Most companies were going bankrupt. Shinnok began to wonder what he should do. After all, he needed a job to survive. Then he saw a recruitment notice for hunters, and in any case, he had experience in that line of work. The scene then shifted to the Hunters Association music, where several people were feeling anxious because they wanted to become hunters. There were many people there until suddenly Lee Seun appeared, catching everyone by surprise. She was the hunter Yunang talked about so much. Soon, everyone began to believe she was there to see someone. Sun noticed a Hunter Academy graduate named Hansa, whose awakened ability was electrokinesis. Didn't believe San was that strong, while the agent Beneder thought San was quite skilled and would be useful. However, Sion reminded the agent that hunting in a corrosion rift was real combat. Lee knew that practice and real combat were completely different. It was hard for Academy students who had only trained in safe environments to endure the real thing, so it would take SA a long time to adapt. She also thought the team leader should be aware of this, and she wasn't entirely sure whether she herself could stay out in the field for the entire week. Then the narrator announced that the first match was about to begin. In any case, Sunan was there to do the job. She had been assigned, she was there to recruit. The narrator then announced that the candidate was interesting because he was a civilian who wasn't even from the Hunter Academy, which was highly unusual, and he wondered what kind of courage a man like that had to be standing on that stage. Soon, he introduced the candidate Yuchan Siluk to everyone. Chanuk had not yet gotten used to his new name. The rules stated that personal weapons not provided by the association were not allowed, and inflicting life-threatening injuries was prohibited. In the end, Shonoke had truly decided to become a hunter. The first thing he had to do was actually save the world that was destined to fall. But at the same time, he needed to live well and eat well. His opponent found everything that was happening unbelievable. Shanak needed to achieve good results in that tournament. And so, the narrator began the battle. Shuk's opponent laughed because his opponent couldn't even gather mana. He thought the match would be very easy to win, introducing himself as the undefeated spearmaster of the Hunter Academy. However, he couldn't land a single attack. Shayok had disappeared and suddenly appeared behind him, telling his opponent that he was quite clumsy with a spear. With that, he struck his opponent hard in the stomach and without wasting time followed up with another blow to the chin. His opponent was practically defeated already, and Shan Music Sock didn't like it at all because it didn't last long. He had simply used his bare hands because he thought that if he used a spear, music, he would injure his opponent too quickly. In the end, he realized his opponent was just a beginner, and he hoped that wasn't common among hunters. Seon was impressed by what she had just seen, and soon checked Shan Silk's data, unable to understand why his previous job had been at a logistics company. One of the agents pointed out that he had no mana accumulated in his body, so they found it very strange music that Chanel had such power, since he would normally need to accumulate mana for that. In the end, they believed it had just been luck. Tian then gave her agent a candy to make him shut up. She believed that Hyunok was not intentionally accumulating mana and wanted to understand how that was possible. Shanyo felt a bit uncomfortable, but he knew he needed to prove his skills. He prepared another strike, telling his opponent not to worry because he wouldn't deal a fatal injury, and with that Hyunok finished him off. Soon, many people began talking about Hyunok. Kun stayed alert because while some were busy evaluating him, she needed to make her move. She wanted to see Chan-suk's true abilities. An agent asked where she was going, and Kun replied that she was going to see the association's music president. Then the scene shifted to Chan. So beating up another opponent he considered very weak. He didn't understand it. These rookies wanted to become hunters, but music, they were extremely weak. No matter how much he fought, it felt like everyone was on the same level. This made him curious about what they actually taught at the Hunter Academy. Hyunok wondered if there was no one decent there until Sangha appeared and caught the attention of some losers who thought she looked stunning. She was the final candidate, and Chan-seok noticed that she had accumulated more mana than anyone he had faced. Sangha, in turn, could see up close that he wasn't accumulating any at all, so she believed he had gotten that far purely by luck. Chonyo began to think that the academy must also teach generic phrases since everyone kept saying the same thing. Sangha believed he didn't have a unique ability since he was only throwing punches and declared that she wouldn't go easy on him because of that. Chanok felt a little intimidated by her. In truth, he did have a unique ability, but he thought it was better not to use it so as not to seriously injure people. Sangha took a breath and prepared to strike with her sword. She rushed toward Shonyo, and he made a huge jump. Sangha couldn't believe he had dodged it just by jumping. Shani found the way her power worked interesting. She ran an electric current through the scabbard and the blade, turning it into magnetic force. It was as if she had created a railgun. He praised her ability, saying it was the most impressive he had seen so far, but added that she had missed the most important thing. Sana asked what he meant. John explained that when she was thinking about attacking, music was too focused on speed. Her mistake was that to accelerate the drawn sword even faster, she placed the magnetic rail in empty air. No matter how fast or powerful it was, Shanseo thought he'd be an idiot to stand still music while an attack like that came at him. Se thought he was extremely arrogant and said she could defeat someone like him, even without using her technique. Shio moved toward her and thought she was the idiot. He had already dodged her fastest attack, so there was no way she could hit him. The comment only made Esse even angrier. She began gathering a large amount of mana, and Shinnok knew she was overdoing it. She was forcing herself, music, to accumulate mana, and if she continued like that, her body would be completely destroyed. He approached her, admitting that the fight had been quite fun, but that they should end it there. He told her to raise her left hand if it hurt, and then he struck her hard in the stomach. Sa was completely battered after he landed several blows on her, and he finished it with a powerful punch to her face, sending her flying as blood sprayed from her nose. S.A., who until then had been the promise of that selection, simply collapsed like a ripe fruit falling to the ground, leaving many spectators stunned. After all, she was the Academy's top student. And that was how Shonyo became the talk of the moment. Chonok truly acknowledged that she was more skilled than the other guys. But to him, Sangha had neglected her physical training and relied solely on mana. Then he heard a noise coming from her and thought she hadn't given up. But in truth, Sangha was raising her left hand, trembling heavily. He clearly remembered that he had told her to do that if it hurt too much. Soon, a subordinate went to the narrator and brought him a notice that needed to be announced to everyone. The narrator informed them that the tournament schedule would be changed and asked Shanok to take a short break. Shanyo didn't quite understand as he thought the tournament was over. However, the narrator announced that Shinnok himself would have a special match against an active hunter organized with special permission from the association's music president. Shan-seok saw the opponent's name appear on the monitor, visible only to the audience, and judging by their reactions, he believed it was a very skilled huntress. He soon realized that this huntress wanted to test his music abilities, and he noticed that Earth and that strange world really weren't so different in some ways. Soon Kuni appeared, dragging her sword along the ground. She confirmed Shiok's name and apologized for appearing so suddenly, explaining that this was the only way to verify his abilities. Music, she introduced herself and remarked that the stage was far too small for him. She then invited him to fight her, adding that he could refuse if it was too much. She would understand since it was very sudden. Shinoki immediately recognized her as the hunter ranked 10th in the world. Moreover, the aura emanating from her body showed that she was a true professional. In his current condition, it would be unlikely for him to defeat her, but he was willing to fight anyway, and so he accepted. The narrator was confused. While Chanso honestly stated that he, music, hadn't expended much energy yet, Tien thought Chanuk was very enthusiastic. In any case, Chanuk saw only benefits in fighting her. He had already achieved the best possible results in the tournament. She was also the perfect opponent to prove what he was capable of, and he believed that fighting her would raise his value. Everyone was stunned. Kun moved incredibly fast, and Chanuk blocked her movement, but he couldn't understand how a woman's body could hold so much power. The clash between his weapon and her sword sent a shock through him. Tried music to strike again, and he backed away. Compared to the beginning, his speed had dropped considerably, and he was extremely tired. He couldn't see a single opening in the 10th music. Best hunter in the world, and he also realized that this body simply didn't have the physical capacity to push much further. Seun remarked that she had been hoping for a good warm-up for the first time in a long while, but she could see that he was suffering from extreme fatigue. Even so, she thought he did well and believed he could last 5 minutes, but he exceeded her expectations by enduring for 30 minutes. Then Kuna moved toward him, wanting to make things easier for Chanuk since he had almost no mana stored, and there wasn't much mana in the atmosphere either. In the end, he didn't want to use what he felt he needed to use at that moment, but he was running out of options. Quickly, he activated the Flame of Paradoxe. Tried to strike him, but he managed to dodge. She had swung her sword with enough force that he shouldn't have been able to evade it, and she watched in surprise as he suddenly began to burn. The Flame of Paradoxe was the specialty he had used constantly before returning to Earth, and he trusted that power. His clothes remained intact because, unlike normal flames, the black flame could not burn matter. Instead, each of those flames burned using music, abstract concepts that he designated as fuel. With his current power, he couldn't burn concepts with high ignition points such as his own self, music memories, or reason. Thus, the concept he chose to burn at that moment was fatigue. He made a move and Kun saw that he had suddenly become faster. Shan Seo tried to strike her and Seon blocked the attack, wanting to know whether he had truly recovered in such a short time. Soon she tried to strike him with multiple attacks. Shanseo blocked every single one, and Soon wanted to understand what was going on. The concentration of mana in the air fluctuated between high and low, yet the arena's settings hadn't changed, so she needed to grasp what was really happening. Just as fire releases heat when it burns matter, the Flame of Paradoxe also releases mana when it burns abstract concepts. Music Chonseok basically used mana to ignite the Flame of Paradoxe, and in turn, his ability burned his fatigue to generate even more mana. It was an endless cycle. In other words, his specialty was like someone grabbing another person's leg and never letting go. Jian tried to attack again and failed once more, and she wondered how long he intended to keep going like that. Shan Stokes' ability was essentially a war of attrition, and he made it clear to the huntress that he could still continue. He even flirted, asking whether she happened to like guys who didn't know when to give up. However, Sen shot him down, making it clear that she hated that type of guy. When a tree is set on fire, only ashes are left behind, and ashes that have already burned cannot be burned again. In the same way, the Flame of Paradoxe leaves residue. If everything is burned until only ashes remain, that is the moment when the Flame of Paradoxe disappears. At that point, Seon saw that Chonok had endured for 4 hours and 17 minutes. Seeing that he had lasted that long, she asked if he wanted a little more time, but all he wanted at that moment was to be spared. Soon, the narrator announced Kyun as the winner. Suddenly, she pulled out a lollipop in entrance, and the men who accompanied her were surprised to see it. Gave the lollipop to Chanuk for his hard work, and revealed that she had placed her business card inside it. Shansuk looked at her card, and Kun told him they would talk about the details later. For now, he just needed to call her. In the end, the hunter selection was concluded and Shan Sok had to go up on stage to receive his prize. At that moment, Shok realized that Janabe was a hunter agency. The scene then shifted abruptly. He was eating the lollipop while looking at his smartphone and discovered that it contained a hunter's license. He thought it was extremely high-tech. Back in his time, they only handed out a piece of paper. He also saw that there were many options he needed to review. It really had everything. Suddenly, a man appeared and confirmed Chok's name, saying that Chan Sok looked better in person than on camera. Shan Sok couldn't help but notice that the man was very tall, seeming to be over 2 meters in height. Curious about who he was, Chanok received a business card from what looked music like a streetlight pole. He was a hunter named Yunyong Hyun from the Taibak Guild, and he was there to invite Chan Seo to join his team. If Chan Seo gained enough experience with them, Han guaranteed that he would shine. Chan Seo didn't think it sounded like empty sales talk, but he remembered that Seun had also given him her number. He already had a prior commitment, so he couldn't give a definitive answer to the streetlight pole. He explained that he would think a bit more before making a decision. Han gave him all the time he needed, but advised him to think very carefully about the choice he would make, then said goodbye. Chonok was startled and thought it would be best to music, definitely skip tieback. Next, the scene showed Seun answering Chonok's call as he wanted to know where he was supposed to go. She told him she was at the cabin, the second floor of the Hunter Association building, and sent him the location. Shonyo went to the cabin where Music, a very cheerful receptionist, greeted him. Soon, Kun welcomed him and revealed that he had arrived early. Shanseo thought the cafe there had a familiar name, and Seun asked if something had happened. Shan Seok revealed that a guy had tried to recruit him into a guild, explaining that the man was gigantic. Seon immediately guessed it was Hyeon since he had shown interest in Chan Seok. The other guilds would certainly no longer dare to make an offer. Shan Seo then asked whether that didn't mean the same thing for Janabe. At that moment, Seon made it clear that she had no intention of recruiting him, which obviously left Shanuk confused. She asked what he thought about working without being affiliated with a guild like a freelancer, and Shanuk was surprised to learn that he didn't need to belong to a guild. Kun believed that Han would offer Chanuk a junior position, and he didn't understand where she was going with that. She explained that he would be a partner hunter. She also reminded him that he wasn't from the Hunter Academy. She explained that hunter rankings within a guild were divided into 3 types: junior, senior, and partner. Juniors and seniors belong to teams led by partner hunters, so they are essentially salaried employees. Partner hunters, on the other hand, hold shares in the guild. Instead of receiving a salary, they share in the net profits the guild earns. It was basically like a law office for Chonyo, and until then, he had heard that hunters had founded guilds using law firms as their model. So Kun stated that he didn't necessarily need to belong to a guild or go through the junior and senior rankings to become a partner hunter. Shanyo understood, and if he became famous and achieved respectable results, they would automatically come looking for him. Xian was happy and confirmed this, even offering him a piece of candy. Though Chonyo didn't understand why she was doing that, in the end, he thought it would be difficult for him to receive any proper requests since he still had no connections or experience. Seon made it very clear that she would help him with that for free. But Chio thought that when charity is too generous, the saint becomes suspicious. Music, he couldn't see any reason for her to help him. And Seon explained that in the future, when he had built his reputation enough to be recruited by a guild, all she wanted was for him to remember that there was a place called Janabe. That would be how he repaid his debt to her. She also handed him an envelope telling him he could take a look at it if he wanted music, and giving him complete freedom of choice, showing that there was no obligation at all. Shanseok wanted to know what it was and revealed that it was a request from his home city of Incheon. There was a place called Gyeodongo Island where a corrosion zone had formed 2 years earlier after a failed attempt to eliminate a corrosion rift. Jonak asked if he just had to get rid of that rift, but Seun made it clear that it wasn't that simple. He would have to patrol Gyeodongo Island, and if he found any additional corrosion rifts, then he would need to eliminate them. Shanyo saw that the mission would start in a month, and that he would earn 15 million won if he succeeded. Considering that it was a life-threatening job, the pay wasn't very good, so he thought that if he felt it was unfair, he should become stronger and more famous. That way, the money would start flowing into his pocket. Music. She asked for his answer and he obviously accepted. The scene then shifted to a limousine where Seon was on a call with someone who wanted to know if Chan Silk was any good. Seun gave all the information about him, making it clear that he had completed the tournament using only his bare hands, even though the tournament required everyone to use weapons. She also revealed that he had endured fighting against her for 4 hours. The person on the call was incredulous and asked whether Kion had limited her powers. The person on the call was her boss, and she reminded him that she was a veteran hunter with 10 years of experience, all of it built by surviving hellish places. She should normally have been able to toy with him, but 4 hours was something she truly hadn't expected. She strongly doubted she would ever find someone like Shanyo again. The scene then showed the city of Incheon and Gyeodongo Island. Kun's music. Boss thought it didn't matter how highly she evaluated him, because the mission on Gyeodongo Island specifically required hunters with prior mission experience. Chonyo's skills might be excellent, but there was no way to know whether he would perform well working in a team with veteran hunters. However, Sion believed her boss didn't need to worry because she had placed him with someone trustworthy. The boss preferred to trust Sen since she was the brains of the operation, but he also wanted to know how she believed Chonyo could reach her level. Seun then stated that if Chonyo ever reached her level, he would also be able to defeat her boss. Suddenly, the scene shifted to 1 month earlier. A man was delivering a package to apartment 1506 and thought it was incredibly heavy. The package was for Chonseok, and after receiving it, he saw that it was unbelievably long and thought that a spear would go well with it. He then picked up an elixir, a type of potion hunters use in emergencies. It contained condensed mana, which was very useful when mana was urgently needed. The common way of dealing with mana was like drinking water from a water purifier. Mana is controlled by the individual in the atmosphere and stored in the body, then used when necessary. The elixir allowed this process to be done in a short period of time. However, Chonok used mana in a different way from others. He skipped the storage process and directly absorbed and used the mana from the atmosphere. The advantage was there was no limit since he used the mana in the air. There was also the matter of the process of absorbing and releasing mana through the channels it passes through, music, which gradually strengthen and allow the amount of mana that can be used to increase. The downside was that until those mana channels grew, the amount he could control was small, making it difficult to produce a strong output in a short period of time. Seok didn't have time to wait at that moment, so he decided to store some mana before using it. Shanseo believed that by training with the elixir for about 1 month, he should be able to grow as much as he needed. The scene then shifted to Geodongo Island, where there were many people confirming their identities using QR music codes. Shanyo was soon placed in Squad 8, and he overheard many people complaining that they wanted better pay and were also afraid until Sangha called out to him. Shan Sok thought her hair looked different, but Sangha clarified that her hair was normal and that it was just static music electricity from before. In the end, they were in the same squad, and she thought that was great. She hoped they could work together on that mission. Shanak didn't see any reason for it, and Sangha explained that he was stronger than her, so she could observe him and learn from him. Shanak pretended to be surprised and said that his shoulders were practically about to fall off. San didn't understand the irony and warned that if he had chronic dislocations, it would be very dangerous. Chonak realized she had no sense of humor. Soon the person in charge of the mission called Squad 8 since everyone was gathered and gave them an overview of the mission. After all, they were aware that some hunters were participating in a mission for the first time. Chinook paid full attention as they explained that corrosion rifts are classified as Class 1, 2, and 3. The closer a rift is to Class 1, the more dangerous it is. The first corrosion rift to appear in a specific area is also given the additional designation Alpha. The location of the Alpha corrosion rift on Guyodongo Island was at a church in the northern part of the island, although it had not yet been classified. And considering that corrosion rifts grow stronger over time, the person in charge asked Squad 8 not to approach the corrosion rift, reminding them that their mission was only to patrol and identify eliminating any additional corrosion fissures that might appear. However, some members of Squad 8 didn't like the idea of an elimination mission for a squad that included a rookie. Before long, people started making comments that showed music their concern, and Shinnok was shocked, thinking they were being overly dramatic. As they began to move out, they were informed that the island was being monitored by the offshore team in the control room, music, so they could get in touch and request support whenever needed. Some of them started planning, but Shinoki stated that they would explore the two areas over the course of a week. The members of his squad didn't understand, and Shinoki explained that music, they would set up a base at Hwagesa and operate from there. He showed the map on his smartphone, and the others began to judge him, thinking he was just an interfering nobody they had never heard of. They also didn't understand why they would set up a base at Hwagesa. Music Shonyo explained that from Hwagesa they could see Yukne, and from the peak of Hwagesa they could see Guodong directly. In addition, the old temple building was still there, and they could use that place as lodging. The others grew quite irritated with Shinnok. One of them pointed out that there were many places nearby where they could stay, while another was worried about being surrounded and then having to climb a mountain. John Seok saw no sense in that, since they weren't fighting thousands of enemies. There was no way they could be surrounded there. In any case, they didn't want to follow the orders of a hunter they considered inexperienced. Chonok realized that idiots who defied logic existed in every world. Eventually, Chonok thought it would be better for them to act separately. The scene then shifted to the middle of the forest where they were all running. Chonok expected San to be running behind him, but he was curious about the man running alongside them. He sensed that the man had slightly more mana than Sana. The man had introduced himself earlier. His name was Kim-ji. Chonok was curious about why Minji had followed them. Minji knew it was the first mission for both of them and didn't want the rookies to act alone. Chan-sok was actually grateful to Min-jae for his consideration. In the end, Chanok began to believe that there was at least one decent person in that squad. Suddenly he realized something and asked everyone to stop. He told the two of them to hide. All of a sudden, numerous monsters appeared nearby. Min-jae thought they should avoid all of those monsters since it looked like there were at least 50 of the creatures. Chonok immediately asked what Min-jae's unique ability was. Min-jae was startled by the question because he sensed that Chonyo was eager to fight. Chonyo believed it was natural for a hunter to fight corrosion creatures, which was why he wanted to know Min-jae's unique ability. Min-jae then revealed that his unique ability was flame. Chonok asked which technique Min-jae was most confident in, and Min-jae said he trusted his fireball the most. Chonok told him he would give the signal and Min-jae should attack. Then Min-jae couldn't believe it. Sa asked what she should do, and Min-jae couldn't believe that SA was also willing. He warned that it wasn't prudent for just 3 people to face 50 monsters, especially since it was their first mission. Min-jae thought it would be better to contact the other hunters by radio. Chonok immediately told me that those hunters wouldn't arrive in time. Unlike them, who had headed straight for Hagisa Temple, the other hunters were currently searching along the coast. In Chan-seok's music view, it would be reckless to contact them by radio since there was no guarantee the hunters would even hear the call. There was also the issue that if they waited for those monsters to disperse, they could become a threat to the other hunters. Mai acknowledged that Chonok was right, and even if there were a hunter nearby, they wouldn't be able to arrive immediately because of the previous conflict. Shan-seo quickly told the two of them that they had to deal with those monsters. Even if they were at a disadvantage, it was something that truly needed to be done, and he thought they should carry out a surprise attack. There wasn't much time, but he began drawing on the ground. Soon, he laid out a plan for the two of them. Mi thought that Chan-seo had come up with a very detailed strategy and had even anticipated every possibility. He began to feel that Shanyul had experienced that kind of battle countless times, and he wondered if Chonyul came from another world. The scene then shifted to Minj leaping forward and hurling a fireball, music at the creatures, blowing some of them apart. MGI then told his partners that he needed some time before he could fire the next fireball. Music Chanok immediately told him to shoot as soon as he was ready. Chanok then used his spear to attack the monsters. He prioritized efficiency in battle, and to achieve maximum efficiency, dividing roles was essential. While the next fireball was being prepared, he would handle the others so they couldn't get close to me. Clearly, he couldn't block all the monsters by himself, which was why dividing roles was important. At that moment, SA drew her sword and joined the attack. Min-jae then told Shonok that he was ready, and Chanok told him to fire. The attack went off successfully and a massive explosion occurred. In this way, they managed to kill all the monsters. Shanyo leaped away to avoid the fireball and ended up burying a spear in the ground just as he was about to tell his companions that they had all done a great job. Min-jae suddenly pulled out a device and pointed it at him, then started smiling, asking Shan-seok to step back a little. Shan-seok was startled, thinking Min-jae was about to shoot him. In the end, Min-jae was holding a gun that implanted microchips. He explained to Chanok and Sana that once the mission was over and safety was secured, the scrap dealer he had hired would come to retrieve the creatures. Chanok didn't quite understand. So, Min-jae explained that it was difficult to recover byproducts directly from corpses since they were bulky and heavy. So, he implanted those chips so that after the mission, a team contracted by the guild could collect everything of value. That was a way to make money. He split the profits with those who gathered the materials. Scrap collectors received a commission, and music returned the rest to the family of a fallen hunter if that hunter ended up dying. Shan-seok wasn't sure whether he could really trust those people. And Min-jae made it clear that this was why it was necessary to find a reliable scrap dealer and sign a contract. Min-jae also thought Shinnok was incredible since they had managed to take down 50 monsters. At that moment, an enormous monster appeared and attacked them all. Shanseo reacted quickly and managed to protect Mi, asking if he was okay. Min-jae was completely confused. Chonyo believed they were facing an intermediate boss or something similar, and he immediately began to lament, thinking that this was the leader of the monsters they had killed. The amount of magical power it possessed was absurd. Sati, completely different from that of the smaller monsters. He then warned his 2 mission partners not to interfere, saying he would handle it. The 2 of them were worried about Chanok and thought they should fight together to buy time. But Chanok made it very clear that they should retreat and leave that big problem to him. Music. The way he spoke frightened them. In the end, Chanok believed the best course of action was for him to deal with the monster alone. He could use the Flame of Paradox without worrying about his allies and finish it as quickly as possible. So, he called the creature out to fight. Sangha and MG stayed together, and MG thought they should help Shinnok since he might be in danger. Sangha, however, didn't think it was necessary. It might have looked like Shinnok was being pressured, but he hadn't been hit even once so far, and he was fighting the monster with his spear. But that wasn't all Sangha noticed. She knew that if it were her fighting, even just dodging those attacks would have been extremely difficult. She also saw that wherever the spear pierced, black flames clung to the wound. She wondered what the hell that was. The more those flames accumulated, the slower the monster became. And although Chasseur had seemed to be struggling at first, SA could sense that at that moment, her ally was playing with the monster. She was no longer sure he was a rookie hunter like her because that simply wasn't possible. At that moment, the monster tried to attack Chasseur, but he managed to dodge. He quickly threw his spear into the air, and Sangha's eyes widened at that move. Then they shouted for Chanuk to be careful as the monster was charging straight toward him. The monster ended up face to face with Shanyo, and just as it was about to strike, the spear fell and landed squarely on its head, proving that Chanuk was not messing around. He was surprised that the monster was still able to move even after burning through all of its physical strength. He then thought he should finish the monster off for good. His two allies were completely shocked since they had seen that he was a rookie, yet clearly a capable one. Minjae thought that Shanyo had been under heavy pressure at first, but now the monster was on the ground. So he wanted to understand what had happened. At that point, Chanok called out to Minji, asking whether it was normal for a monster like that to appear on Guodongo Island. Minji explained that the monster was not even an erosion unit. If it had been one, it would have at least received a grade 3 classification. Music Show clearly remembered hearing before the operation that the Alpha Erosion Unit on Guodongo Island had not been classified. In that case, he thought that the Alpha Erosion Unit on Guodongo must have been updated to grade 3, catching the two of them by surprise. Sangha also recalled that the person responsible for bringing in the missions had not mentioned that. Shani believed that if it was not grade 3, there was no way to explain the current situation. And Minja grew worried since the difference between an unranked hunter and a music grade 3 hunter was immense. Because of that, MG thought that perhaps no hunter would survive, and he believed they should save the other hunters. He trusted Chanok's abilities and thought they could do it. But Chanok firmly rejected that possibility, leaving Minji confused. Chanok did not know how he could find and save all the hunters wandering alone across that island. After all, he was not a god capable of doing such music things. He reminded the two of them that their mission was to identify and eliminate any additional erosion units that had been generated and that they should not expect anyone to die while carrying out such work. Music Sangha then wanted to know how he would feel if he were in that situation. Shinnok did not really understand what she meant, and she went on with that talk about how he would feel if there were no one available to help him. He saw no reason to do that and made it clear that he was not saying those things because he failed to understand people's emotions. In the end, he was talking about the outcome. There were also unavoidable deaths in that world, and when facing a death like that, no matter what thoughts or emotions he might have, he knew he could die. Thus he believed the two of them should not humiliate themselves in a hopeless situation. Thinking that they needed to change their way of thinking since it was impossible to live in that world while thinking the way they did, the scene then shifted to night. They had arrived at the location, and the building was empty. There were no traces of other erosion creatures nearby either, and because it was dark, they could not see anything that required attention. Minjae thought it was good that the lights allowed them to see the positions of the other hunters. Shanyo, on the other hand, thought it was dangerous because it revealed their location. If something like that massive monster appeared again, things would go very badly. He believed it would be better to send a warning message to everyone about what had happened. Minjae and Sangha then explained that if they eliminated the core of the erosion unit, all erosion creatures would disappear, since those creatures needed the energy emitted by the erosion unit. Chanok had not imagined it was that simple. The scene then shifted to Sangha and Minjae sleeping while Chanok remained awake. He placed an item near the two of them, believing that the button would sound an alarm if a monster appeared, allowing him to leave without worry. Chanok wanted to finish everything once and for all, but suddenly he stopped running. Realizing that he had the feeling things were going too smoothly, he then encountered another monster which judged that Chanok was a face it had never seen before. The scene then shifted to Guodongo Island, specifically to the Hunters Association Situation Room, where reports were coming in about hunters from Squad 5 who had gone missing. There were reports that the monsters were moving in an organized manner, and one man was desperate about everything that was happening. Since it was an unclassified erosion that had turned into an emergency, they needed to call in reinforcements to help the hunters on the island. Then, one of the staff members reported that someone was approaching the Alpha erosion core. However, the man in charge of all the monitoring did not like this at all and wanted the hunter who was doing that to be stopped. Soon they identified that the one approaching the corrosion core was Chansel from Squad 8, whom the monitoring system recognized as the first to have discovered the erosion and the core's update. The person in charge wanted to connect to the terminal to find out whether Chinoki was still alive, since a core update like that had never happened before. Because Chan-sok had been the one to discover it, the head of monitoring believed that Chan-sok would have the answer. Meanwhile, Chan-sok was running extremely irritated because the monster was much faster than he had expected. He thought the monitoring service was inefficient since they were listening to everything he said, but were neither subjugating nor even properly investigating the situation. The workers in front of the computers soon became embarrassed as Chanok made it very clear that when he got the chance, he would shove an erosion core right in their faces. That was how they confirmed that Chanok was alive. The problem for Chanok was that the Flame of Paradox still did not have the ability to kill. In the end, he was finishing off his enemies with his spear after reducing their health with the Flame of Paradox. However, bringing down that gigantic monster would be difficult. To make matters worse, Shanyo had used a great deal of the mana on Godongo Island while fighting the demonic bat, so he could not leave the island and needed to find a place there where he could extract mana. Eventually, he found what he truly wanted, the core. He wanted the monster to keep up with him because there was something he wanted to test, and suddenly the monitoring team lost Chanso's GPS signal. They soon reported that Chansoke had entered the erosion core, leaving the head of the monitoring division extremely surprised. The scene then shifted to Chansuk inside the core, where the place was cleaner than he had expected. He wondered about the size of Grade 1 and Grade 2 cores, since those cores did not spread so quickly, and he believed that the erosion core had released its limits. Thus, he thought it best to finish off that massive monster as soon as possible. One of the biggest problems of the Flame of Paradox for Chinoke was that it spread to all living beings except himself. Even if those living beings were his allies, if it reached a level he could no longer control, he would no longer be able to use his ability. And that was its greatest drawback. At music that moment, he struck the monster with everything he had, and when he fought alone, that disadvantage practically ceased to exist. The real change began at that moment. The mana Chinoki had absorbed from the monster spread through every corner of his body, making his meridians more resilient. He began to feel an efficiency far better than he had expected. Music. As the monster made a great deal of noise, it was only then that Chanuk understood what it was doing. It was calling for reinforcements. Several monsters appeared nearby, and Chinoki thought it was a shame because the overwhelming number of monsters no longer meant anything to him. In any case, music. Shan Seok felt that he had grown stronger, though he was still far from what he had been in the other world. He wanted to know where the erosion core was, and he clearly remembered me explaining that the core was the most heavily eroded thing in that space. Music. Suddenly, a creature spoke, saying it would extinguish the fire, and appeared behind Shanuk, catching him by surprise. The creature truly waited for the fire to go out, and Shanuk was surprised that it had waited for his Flame of Paradox to fade. He realized that the erosion core was on a completely different level, and he immediately wondered whether he could perform a combination of 4 strikes, music, at his current level. He then charged toward the erosion core, but the creature blocked the attack. However, Chonseok's strike was so powerful that it caused the creature's weapon to begin cracking. Chonseo then used a technique called the Twin Moon Spear, sending the creature flying away. That technique was quite fascinating. The Twin Moon Spear left behind a blue trail that formed along the path of Chanso's attack. This trail perfectly imitated the first strike, repeating it 4 times. And if he attacked along the side of the trail, it became a simple technique that delivered 4 consecutive blows. The creature tried to strike Shanti, but he dodged. The real danger was when the blue trail attacked after an impact, turning into a complicated circular twin spear dance that was extremely difficult to evade. Facing the delayed combined attack, Chonio already anticipated that his opponent would make a mistake. At that moment, the creature was struck, and Chonok believed the fight was over. He struck it again, destroying multiple parts of its body and causing it to nearly disintegrate. The creature then began to fade away, but it left something behind. This confused Chonio, as he believed the creature would simply vanish and everything would come to an end. Instead, he found himself holding some kind of box. He opened it without understanding what it was, and the scene shifted to show the monitoring center in chaos as multiple erosion zones were spreading across Gaodongo Island. The head of monitoring was on the verge of a heart attack as he no longer knew what to do. To make matters worse, they had also lost contact with Squad 9. At that moment, the head of monitoring was completely stunned, believing that everything was spiraling out of control and that only a miracle could reverse the situation. He did not want to see the hunters wiped out. Then someone called out to him and reported that Shinoki had entered the Alpha Erosion Core. The head of monitoring could hardly believe it. They brought up the main screen, and it showed that the Alpha Erosion Core on Guadongo Island was being released at that very moment, confirming that all erosive entities had been eliminated. The head of monitoring realized that a miracle truly had occurred, even if he still did not fully understand it. The scene then shifted to Chan-seok, who was looking up at the sky and feeling a pleasant breeze. Next, the scene moved to Sa, who was cutting down several monsters with her sword. She was badly injured and deep in thought since Chanok had disappeared. Min-jae soon asked whether music. She still believed they had any chance of coming back alive, and Sangha could see that he was already at his limit. She herself was no longer confident she could hold out much longer. The creatures kept coming without pause. Sangha prepared herself to continue fighting, but music things turned dire for her as she could no longer feel her legs. Mai realized how bad the situation had become. And just as Sangha had accepted that they would become food for those monsters, the monsters suddenly began to disintegrate, leaving them completely confused. Then the scene shifted to the hunters' rendezvous point on Music the Island. Shanok saw that many people there were injured and wondered whether things had gone completely crazy while he was gone. Music. Everyone was utterly exhausted and could not understand how the rookie was still alive. They had all heard that he had single-handedly cleared a grade 3 erosion source. To the veterans, it made no sense at all. Min-jae was sitting with Sana and waved to Chanoki. He still could not believe the message Chan-seok had sent him. Unable to comprehend how Chan-seok had decided to take down the source alone, Chan-seok tried to explain, in other words, that he wanted to protect his fellow hunters. Since things had turned out in the best possible way, he chose to play the good guy and then made it clear to his two companions that if he had known it would turn out like this, he would have left before sunset. Then a man in a suit approached and introduced himself to Chanuk. His name was Byun-yong-tai, and he explained that he was the branch manager of the North District 3 of Yongin-chan, an operational corporation of Korea. Chanuk immediately asked whether Yung-tai was the one who had told him to go to the hunter's meeting point. Yung-tai asked for a moment of his time and informed him that the mayor wished to meet with him. The scene then shifted to Shansuk stepping out of a car. He thought that old men really did have a habit of ordering people around. Then, he clearly remembered that the contract had not mentioned a reward for clearing a grade 3 threat, and since he was already there, he figured he might as well negotiate the price. Music. At that moment, a young man was waiting for Chan-so to get out of the car, even as it was still raining. He introduced himself as Lee Pilge, the officer in charge of communication and cooperation. He led Chan-seok inside, saying that the mayor was eager for the meeting. Pil himself had been shocked when he received the report from Guyodongo Island. It had caught the mayor's attention so strongly that he had canceled his entire schedule just to see Chan-sok. Though Chan-sok did not even think he had done anything that special. Pila believed Chan-so was greatly mistaken because a rookie hunter destroying a grade 3 source alone was something that had not happened since the time of the first hunter known as the Great Senior. In the end, Chonok thought that it really had been quite difficult for him at his current level, but he had not imagined that someone else had once been capable of such a feat. He concluded that this so-called Great Senior must have been a true monster. Pilja then handed Chonok over to the mayor, who immediately thanked Music. Him for coming from so far away and introduced himself. The mayor of Inshan was named Pak Jian. Jaeon also apologized to Chanso for calling him in at such a gloomy time since it was raining and invited him to sit down so they could talk. He also ordered Pilge to bring coffee for the two of them. John told Chanso Music that as if he did not already know, he had rendered a great service to the country. John confessed that Guyodongo Island had been a major headache for him. He knew the problem had to be solved, but he did not have a large budget, so he could not hire expensive hunters. Music. Shinoki realized that everything had turned out wonderfully for the mayor since the issue had been resolved at a very low cost. The mayor did not deny it and admitted that he was genuinely surprised that this had been Chonuk's first mission. He saw great talent in Chanuk, who had begun his journey in an incredible way. After all, the city where he served as mayor had become the safest place in Korea. In addition, Incheon's airport infrastructure was excellent with countless logistics facilities already in place. There were also free economic zone projects, and international cities like Songdo and Cheongna were so flooded with foreign investors that it was difficult to choose between them. Inan would grow even more after Shanoki had resolved that problem, and in this way, the mayor assured the rookie hunter that his journey would be smooth and paved with success. At that moment, Chanok remembered Youngtae asking him what his purpose was in working as a hunter. Shan-suk simply thought that if a clogged pipe was leaking filth, someone had to step into the dirty water to unclog it. And that metaphor worked quite well for Youngtae. He believed Shan-suk would become famous. Since capable hunters were incredibly popular, companies would want him for commercials and famous programs would send casting offers. Shanuk then thought that Youngtae was worried that fame might end up ruining him. In the end, Shanoki only wanted to make enough money to live well and eat well, acquiring resources and moving around with the squad carrying bags of gear. Youngtae did not deny that to the rookie hunter, as there were many cases of promising hunters who became intoxicated by fame and forgot their duty. He even thought it was natural for a hunter to lose their way a little. But on the other side of the ceasefire line, dangerous monsters still roamed the erosion zones. Up until then, Korea was the only safe place left and was called the last sanctuary of Earth. But even the sanctuary was being influenced by capital. Young-tae reminded Shanyo that he had accomplished something immense, and many people in difficult situations would become interested in him. He simply did not want Shanoki to stop being a beacon of hope. Shanyo, however, only wondered how much the mayor was going to offer after that speech. He could see that the mayor was essentially laying out silver on a platter without even trying to hide it. Unfortunately for the mayor, Chansok had lived many years and suffered through the same kinds of nonsense, so he would never be swayed by such things. Shane Seok then made it clear to the mayor that by providing music so much support, he was expecting something in return, such as helping boost his declining approval ratings so he could be re-elected. Jian was quite surprised and realized that Chanuk was sharp. Shan Music? Sulk excused himself by saying that smartphones provided information very quickly, and in any case, he knew that the mayor's term would end at music the beginning of the coming year. Reading the atmosphere, the general consensus seemed to be that Jian's re-election was unlikely. The mayor was surprised that Chanok did not beat around the bush. He tried to explain to the hero that in the process of participating in such a request, Chanok would need permission from the Incheon city government. Chanseo saw that there was no way to refuse. He needed the mayor's approval to enter as a rookie. In any case, he knew the mayor could present it the right way and go around saying that he himself had discovered Chonio. By including Chonio in his narrative, his approval ratings would rise. Jian then explained that thanks to the infrastructure he had mentioned, he maintained ties with many domestic and international companies. He even gave an example by showing a contract for the model of a certain coffee mix brand whose contract was about to expire. Chonio's own face could take her place. And that was not all. The possibilities were endless. Chonio immediately thought that to the mayor he was actually quite cheap. The mayor was a little confused. Chonio had been watching the news and the world was desperate for a new face to change the gloomy atmosphere. He clarified that everything the mayor was offering him were things he would obtain anyway at some point. John explained that Shan Sok could choose the highest paying requests, but Shanak promptly declared that the offer was not for him at all. He then took his leave of the mayor and asked him to pass along his congratulations to the coffee mix model, as he was sure she would be able to get the coffee brand to renew her contract with her. The scene then shifted outside where it was still raining. In the end, a hooded figure remarked that the Godong-du Island test had been a failure. A man in a suit apologized, but also said he had good news, revealing that he had a segment of the Hunter Association's music qualification exam footage. On his smartphone, he showed Chan Seok fighting. The hooded figure found Shah quite interesting and soon broke into a smile.